All right, welcome to this explainer. For decades, the default playbook for scaling a business was pretty much just buy traffic, run some mass campaigns, and cross your fingers hoping for the best. But honestly, that era is dead. Today, we're diving into the modern growth engine. We're going to see how the absolute smartest companies in the world are using data, experimentation, and clever product mechanics to create growth that literally sustains itself.
Okay, 4.5. I really want you to think about that number. That represents a 4.5 times increase in daily active users for a mature product that had previously hit a massive, and I mean massive, growth wall. That product? Duolingo. We're going to look closely at exactly how they pulled off this huge turnaround by leveraging data and growth mechanics. It's kind of the ultimate hook to show you what happens when you get this whole system right.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, the growth marketing mindset. Then, AARRR funnels and growth loops. Next, we'll dive into the Duolingo turnaround, followed by mastering the growth tactics, and finally, testing your way to scale.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the growth marketing mindset. So there's a really stark contrast between traditional marketing and growth marketing. Basically, traditional marketing is obsessed with the very top of the funnel, getting people to know you even exist through brand awareness, offline channels, that kind of mass communication. But growth marketing, that is a highly data-driven approach. It's totally focused on continuous experimentation and full funnel optimization. See, growth marketers care just as much about what happens after a user actually signs up. They want to know how that user activates, how long they stick around, and crucially, whether they refer their friends. It's just a much more holistic view of the entire customer journey, and it's built on rapid cycles of hypothesizing, testing, and iterating.
All right, moving on to Section 2, AARR funnels and growth loops.
Okay, so this is the classic AARR framework, which you've probably heard called pirate metrics. It's the traditional, linear way to optimize the customer lifecycle step by step. It starts with acquisition, actually finding your users, then activation, getting them to that aha moment as quickly as possible. Next up is retention, keeping them coming back. Then referral, turning them into vocal advocates for you. And finally, revenue, maximizing their lifetime value. For a really long time, this linear funnel was the absolute gold standard for growth. You'd optimize each step just to move people further down the pipe.
But here is the fundamental shift happening in tech right now. Funnels are a one-way flow. Basically, they're leaky pipes that lose users at every single stage. To keep a funnel working, you literally have to constantly pour new traffic, which is usually really expensive paid traffic, into the top. If you stop spending, well, you stop growing. Growth loops, on the other hand, are circular and compounding. They're these amazing self-reinforcing systems where the output of one cycle directly feeds the input of the next. So instead of a leaky pipe, you're actually building a flywheel.
So how exactly do you build a growth loop? Well, you use what's called the fuel framework. First, feed. You inject an initial cohort of users. Second, utilize. Users engage with the core action of your product. Third, expand. That user action creates an output that becomes visible to others. And fourth, loop. That output pulls in new users, reinvesting the cycle. Think about a tool like Slack. A tech team joins, right? That's your feed. They send messages, which utilizes the product. Then they invite other departments to collaborate, expanding the base. And those new departments, they start their own channels, looping right back into the system. Every single user action directly creates the conditions for new users to join. It is absolutely brilliant.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Duolingo turnaround.
Let's jump back in time to 2018 for a second. At this point, Duolingo was the most downloaded education app in the entire world, but their daily active user growth had completely hit a wall. They were stuck in the single digits year over year. So, to reignite that growth, the team decided to focus heavily on gamification to try and boost retention. They actually looked at a massively popular match-3 puzzle game called Gardenscapes and essentially just copied a core mechanic, a finite moves counter. They gave users a limited number of chances to answer questions correctly before failing a lesson. So, why did this fail so badly? Well, it turns out copying features without the proper context is a massive trap. See, in Gardenscapes, every move involves real strategic decision-making against dynamic obstacles. But in Duolingo, you either know a vocabulary word or you don't. Adding a moves counter didn't add any fun strategy, it literally just added a boring, tacked-on nuisance. The experiment totally flatlined.
But after that failure, Duolingo got incredibly systematic. They built this complex data model to segment their users and simulate growth over 3 years. And guess what? That model revealed one magical metric, QRR, or Current Users Retention Rate. QRR basically measures the chance a highly engaged user comes back again.
The data showed that shifting QRR by just 2% had massive exponential compounding effects on daily active users over time. We're talking 5 times the impact of literally any other metric. By focusing obsessively on retaining the users who were already active, they finally unlocked their true growth engine.
Knowing they desperately needed to move that CUR metric, Duolingo carefully adapted 3 major product bets. First off, they built leaderboards. But, and this is super important, they matched users with similar engagement levels from the prior week just to keep the competition fair and highly motivating. Second, they optimized their famous streak trackers to really highlight consecutive days of activity. And third, they introduced these late-night streak saver push notifications to alert users right before they lost their progress. By adapting these mechanics perfectly to the actual context of learning, they dramatically moved the needle on retention.
Let's get tactical with Section 4, Mastering the Growth Tactics.
There is a massive golden rule here: protect the channel. When Duolingo's team started experimenting with push notifications, they always kept a cautionary tale from Groupon in the back of their minds. You see, Groupon had once rigorously A/B tested adding more daily emails, and sure, they saw initial bumps in engagement, but eventually the sheer volume caused users to just permanently opt out. They essentially destroyed their own communication channel. Duolingo realized that while push notifications are incredibly powerful for retention, overusing them leads to permanent opt-outs. You can optimize the timing, the copy, and the images all you want, but you absolutely must fiercely protect the channel.
So how do you track success without destroying that channel? Well, tracking the right metric depends entirely on the specific goal of your campaign. If you're testing the wording of a re-engagement offer, you really care about the click-through rate. But if you're experimenting with frequency, like sending more messages, the absolute most important metric becomes the opt-out rate. You have to actively monitor if your tests are inadvertently harming your long-term access to the user. And it all comes back to this one undeniable reality. It is so much cheaper to retain customers than it is to acquire new ones. Every single push notification, every email, every streak saver, they all exist for one single reason: to keep the user engaged right now, so you don't have to spend massive marketing dollars to go out and reacquire them later on. All right, our final section, Section 5, Testing Your Way to Scale. The absolute golden rule of A/B testing is super simple. Change one variable at a time. Let's say you run a test where variant A is sent in the morning without an emoji and variant B is sent in the evening with a fire emoji. If variant B wins, what actually caused the win? Was it the time of day? Was it the emoji? You literally have no idea. Mixing variables completely destroys the integrity of your data. You always have to isolate the change.
To execute this safely, you really need the rigorous practices that separate the pros from the amateurs. First up, always form a specific, testable hypothesis. Don't just guess, state exactly what you expect to happen. Second, ensure your sample size reaches statistical significance. Please don't make decisions based on just a handful of clicks. Third, route your tests to subsegments or test devices so you aren't accidentally spamming your entire user base with experiments. And finally, never stop a test early just because one variant takes an early lead. Data fluctuates, so you've got to let the test run its full course. This kind of systematic rigor is exactly how you turn growth from a random guessing game into an actual science.
And that brings us to the core philosophy of everything we've covered today. Stop building leaky pipes. The era of just pouring endless money into the top of a linear funnel is totally over. True, sustainable scale comes from engineering self-reinforcing engines. You want to transform every single user action, whether that's sending a message on Slack, splitting an Uber fare, or hitting a 10-day streak on Duolingo, into a catalyst that drives your next phase of growth.
So, I want to leave you with this somewhat provocative question to think about. Which stage of your customer journey can you turn into a compounding growth loop today? Seriously, look closely at your own product and your own marketing strategy right now. Where can you apply that fuel framework? The data is there.
The